Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Could have sworn I'd seen this one before, but I don't have a like on it, and I searched my channel videos and it didn't pop up, so yes, I'm gonna watch it. Let's go, guys.
When you vote in a general election...
Original link top of the description, guys. From TLDR News UK. Obviously, my name's Connor. Hey, guys, enough of the intro. Let's learn.
Here in the UK,
Voice crack.
Is brought to you by Ground News. When you vote in a general election here in the UK, two things are certain. The BBC push notification about dogs at polling stations, and no matter how you vote, either the Conservatives or Labour will form a government. This has been the case for more than 100 years, barring a couple of exceptions where the government has either been a coalition or relied on smaller parties in supplying confidence agreements. However, that's not to say that this will be the case forever. There were signs in the election last year that the two-party system as we know it might be starting to crumble. So in this video, we're going to have a look at what these signs were, whether the signs still exist, and ultimately whether the UK is heading towards a multi-party system.
I think that like the United States is a true two-party system. I don't like it. I'm no political expert, but I don't...
Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
I'll react to that, sure. Sorry, that was audio from my other video uploading. Sorry about that. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, I think America is a true two-party system because there aren't even such things as coalitions, right? Every election, okay, is either... Every single election, okay, the Democrats and Republicans get around 45 to 50% each. Never 50%, because they get around like 43 to 48% each, right? And so, yeah, maybe like, I mean, in the long past, there's been socialist parties like Eugene Debs, but in the recent times, there's been, you know, independents and some small parties that really have no chance. And I like how other governments have other parties, even if two parties are still dominant, have other parties besides those that constantly get votes enough to get voices in Parliament or in Congress to where they can still have an influence when one of the two main parties needs help to form a coalition, right? And so, yeah, you know what I mean? Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage.
Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. It's worth starting this video by looking specifically at the 2024 general election. By far, this election was one of the best for small parties in British political history. As you likely already know, parties like the Lib Dems and the Greens achieved their highest seat share in their history. This is in addition to the new startup Reform UK,
colloquially knows that our Liberal Party, the United Kingdom, founded in 1988, based on Liberal Democratic headquarters in Westminster, and the leader is Ed Darby. Third largest party in the UK, 72 members. Well, what is their, like, mission statement? You can fast forward if you want, guys. Ideology. The Liberal Democrats have an ideology that draws both from the liberal and social democratic traditions. The party is primarily social liberal, supporting redistribution and skeptical of increasing the power of the state, emphasizing the link between equality and liberty. The party supports investments in progressive taxation, but also promotes civil liberties and less centralized economy. Okay. All right. So they're kind of have a combination of both more leftist and more centrist ideologies. Okay.
highest seat. As you likely already know, parties like the Lib Dems and the Greens achieved their highest seat share in their history. This is in addition to the new startup, Reform UK, garnering a very respectable 5 MPs. When we dig down a bit deeper into the numbers, though, you start to realise just how unprecedented last year's election was. Back in 1951, the share of the vote won by the two main parties was 96.8%. By 2010, this had fallen to 65.1%, and by 2024, it had fallen to a mere 57.4%, the lowest in electoral history. Sure, along the way there were some outliers. In 2017, for instance, the two main parties won 82.3%. But on the whole, there's been a steady decline since the 50s. Conversely, the vote share of the smaller parties has been on the rise. 2020.
I wonder what caused this big spike to get up to around 85% when it was going down pretty gradually, and then 2010 hit a low point and then went very high. A 65 to a 20% increase to here, and then went way further down.
Conversely, the vote.
Also, guys, remember, with statistics and graphs, they can be misleading if you don't pay attention. This is a 50 to 100% y-axis, so it's not 0 to 100. And so the narrower you make the y-axis, the more extreme the jumps can seem, you know what I mean?
But on the whole, there's been a steady decline since the 50s. Conversely, the vote share of the smaller parties has been on the rise.
Excuse me.
2024 saw the highest number of parties exceed 5% of the vote share, with the total coming to 5. Labour, the Tories, Reform UK, the Lib Dems and the Green Party. And the highest number of parties winning seats in Parliament, with the total coming to 11. All of this led to Labour winning the election with the smallest share of the vote, 35%, of any government with any parliamentary majority in British history.
Guys, so independent, we have independence here, right? So independent just means like we don't have a distinct ideology enough to create an own party. It's just that we don't fully agree with any of them enough to join them, and so we're independent.
All of this led to Labour winning the election with the smallest share of the vote, 35%, of any government with any parliamentary majority in British history. Just to be clear, if they won a majority of 1 with this same vote share, this still would have been the lowest share of the vote ever. The fact that they won such a large majority on this shockingly low vote share goes to show just how distorting first past the post can be. If, however, the election had been held using a proportional electoral system, for instance the additional member system used for the Scottish and Welsh Parliament elections, the results would have looked very different indeed. Labour would have fallen vastly short of a majority, with just 228 seats. The Tories would have won 139 seats, Reform 100 seats, the Lib Dems 73 seats, and the Greens 71 seats. In reality, this would have meant that Starmer would have had to have gone cap in hand not only to the Liberal Democrats, but also to the Greens, in order to secure enough seats to form a majority government. It's worth noting too that
I should know this by now. I'm stupid and a bad learner. I just gotta... It elects multiple representatives in each district in proportion to the district's proportion in population. Proportional representation is an electoral system that elects multiple representatives in each district in proportion to the number of people who vote for them. If 1/3 of voters back a political party, the party's candidates win roughly 1/3 of the seats. Today, proportional representation is the most common in the world's democracies. How is it different from the United States? Okay. So I understand. So proportional representation is proportional representation. I should know this by now, but I'm a terrible learner. Proportional representation would mean if you're in a group of a constituency and you have like 30% vote for one guy in the constituency, 20% vote for another, 50% vote for another, then you will have 3 people going, right? But in a non-proportional representative first past, it's just whoever gets the highest wins all of the representation.
To secure enough seats to form a majority government. It's worth noting too that even in this scenario, Starmer would be governing with an even smaller majority than he currently has under the first past the post system. So it's clear that the election last year produced a particularly unfair result for the smaller parties that, at least on election day, the electorate expressed, more than ever before, a desire to move beyond the two-party system. But has this held up since? Well, the best way to find this out is to look at the opinion polls since the election. If anything, it looks like the UK has moved even further into multi-party territory. Since the election, Labour's polling has essentially collapsed, from around 35% immediately after the election in July last year to around 25% now. As a result of this, we've seen the other parties steadily climb in the polls. Both Reform UK and the Conservatives are now polling at a similar level to that of Labour, and in the last month, we've seen different polls showing each of them out in first place. We've also seen the Liberal Democrats polling also start to creep up, going from around 11 or 12% at the time of the election last year to around 15 or 16% now. Clearly, this indicates that voters are still willing to vote for other, smaller parties in a general election. In addition to this, though, YouGov conducted polling in August last year to see whether people think the country would be worse off with only 2 parties in Parliament. Only 9% of respondents think that the UK would be better off. 52%, though, think the country would be worse off. So there's a fair amount of evidence to suggest that the UK may be done with the two-party system. There is, though, one major caveat to point out here, though. It's not actually been that long since the last election. What we mean by this is that, on occasion throughout British political history, we see a temporary tightening between a bunch of parties in the polls. The most recent example of this was prior to the 2019 general election, when the Conservatives, Labour, the Lib Dems and the Brexit Party were all polling similarly. With the news that Farage would step aside for the Conservatives between a bunch of parties in the polls. The most recent example of this was prior to the 2019 general election, when the Conservatives, Labour, the Lib Dems and the Brexit Party were all polling similarly. With the news that Farage would step aside for the Conservatives, their polling collapsed and the Tories ended up winning. Lib Dems and the Brexit Party were all polling similarly. With the news that Farage would step aside for the Conservatives, all polling similarly. When the Conservatives, Labour, the Lib Dems and the Brexit Party.
So is Farage in the Brexit Party or the Conservative Party?
Were all polling similarly.
Reform UK. When was that in? 2016? Or 2019? Okay, so he was UKIP. What was he in 2019? 2019. Sorry, guys. You can fast forward if you want. 2019. Control F. 2019. Reform UK since 2019. What was he? Independent 2018 to 2019. So when was he in charge? Why is the Franco-Prussian War a link in the Nigel Farage thing? Okay, I was just confused because if his party was doing so well, why would he abdicate his position?
With the news that Farage would step aside for the Conservatives,
So Farage said his party's climb down came after months of trying to create a Leave alliance with the Tories. So like a leave the European Union with it, but he felt it was time to put the country before his party and make a unilateral move. He will announce Friday in which seats the Brexit Party is standing. Speculation continues over whether the party will stand, but it is not expected to ruin them. Okay, sorry, I don't know.
Their polling collapsed and the Tories ended up winning. From then until essentially the election last year, the polling returned.
If anyone can explain that to me, I'd very much appreciate it.
Ended up
You guys are always awesome in the comments.
Until essentially the election last year, the polling returned to being mainly split between Labour and the Conservatives. The point we're trying to make here is that there's a chance that the current state of polling is only temporary. It's hard to predict the future, especially in politics. All it would take is for Reform to tear themselves apart, or for either Labour or the Conservatives to gain a significant electoral asset, and we could very realistically go back to the days of only two parties dominating the polls. Now, as we said, it's hard to predict this, but there is at least one indicator in the near future that should show whether the two-party system will endure for at least a little while longer. The multitude of elections taking place on May the 1st. This will be a test of the multi-party nature of the UK. Specifically, all eyes will be on Reform and the Lib Dems to see whether they can translate their positive polling into actual political power. If they're able to, then it will demonstrate the momentum is with them, showing wealthy donors and local activists that their time isn't being wasted.
I love the British coin currencies. They look so fancy and nice.
Thus perpetuating their positive
God,
and
ADD.
local activists able to, then it will demonstrate the momentum is with them, showing wealthy donors and local activists that their time isn't being wasted, thus perpetuating their positive polling. All in all though, while it does look like the two-party system is beginning to crumble, we'll need more sustained evidence of a multi-party system over a much longer time period before we can accurately conclude that the two-party system is dead and buried. There's a lot to unpack here though, with this story about Reform UK outperforming Labour in the polls being reported on by more than 19 sources. Interestingly, we can see...
I'm going to watch through this, guys. I just want to go right to the links and promo codes. If you're interested, make sure to use the /TLDR, ground news /TLDR. We're watching their content, his video, their video. Just make sure to do that if you're interested. Some people might leave because the advertisement is at the end of the video, but I have big questions about Nigel Farage. He is now very interesting. And in where was that? Right here. So UKIP is purple. Also seems to go down. So I saw another video that I have right here. What the hell is happening? Reform take the lead. Wait, UKIP isn't Reform. So is Reform just not a party yet by the end of this X-axis time span? So essentially Nigel Farage left here because he wanted to start a new party? Anyways, would appreciate any comments, guys. Let's go.
On a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to of the polling. We're able to do that because of our sponsor Ground News, whose incredible website and app lets you discover the news and pulls back the curtain on media bias. Built by a former NASA engineer on a mission to give readers an easy, data-driven, objective way to read the news, with Ground News ingesting over 50,000 articles from all over the world, and then organising each by story. For each and every story, you can see the number of reporting sources, where these sources lean position on the political spectrum at an individual level and group level, compare the headlines of each source, and read each article all without ever leaving the app. But one of the best parts of the app is their blind spot feed. It presents you with stories and articles that haven't been reported on by one side of the aisle or the other, helping you better break out of your media bubble and discover what those on the other side of the political spectrum are really saying. Ground News is such a useful tool for our current media landscape, and I think an app like this will only become more essential as the media landscape continues to evolve. If you're interested in everything that Ground News has to offer, you can get 40% off the unlimited Access Vantage plan using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code.
Make sure to use that again if you're interested. Love you all. Hope you're all doing well, especially on videos like this where you can tell I'm very confused on things. I appreciate your comments. Hopefully I'll see you guys next time. Bye. Keep on learning.